You want potential Packer players to watch as we head toward the NFL Combine? Come on, you want potential Packer players to watch as we head toward the NFL Combine. Keith Sanchez from Locked On NFL Draft joins us to break it all down on today's show.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts. You will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet. And the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. NFL Draft is next week, and I know you want some players to watch. Keith Sanchez from Locked On NFL Draft joins us. We're going to talk about receivers. We're going to talk about corners. We're going to talk about pass rushers, interior players. But I wanted to hone in on, before we did that, I wanted to hone in on the receivers for a second. Not because I think this is where the Packers are going to have their #1 overall pick, their first round pick. I don't, frankly. But the Packers have a very specific model, and over the last couple of years, it has actually been quite easy to look at a pool of players in the draft and go, these are the most likely Packers draft picks. They have clear types. And this draft has a small group, not a huge group, but and every year, this is the thing. The Packers do not have, like, the whole premise of they draft projects is funny because when it comes to receivers, they don't. They draft players who produced in college. It is a core tenet. Like, we think about the measurables and all that stuff. They prioritize players who have high-end collegiate production. Now, they also care about size. They want you to be ideally 6 feet tall, 190 pounds. We'll get to the testing part. But just doing that, you got to be 6 feet tall and 190 pounds to ride this ride and produce at a high level in college, you have already shrunk the pool enormously because other teams have decided, hey, look, we're fine with guys that are 175. Or, hey, look, we're fine with guys that are 5'9", 5'10". The Packers, at least to this point, have not decided that that is where they live. So that means the potential pool of players is pretty small, pretty narrow. I have a list here of 9 players for the moment. 9 receivers that I think are hot, like top-end Packers types. And then you need to have the athletic template. You can't run slower than 4.6. Dontavian Wicks ran 4.61. But he was a day 3 pick. They like a 3-cone. Certainly sub 7 would be ideal. They have gone a shade over 7 seconds in the last decade. Randall Cobb was an outlier in a lot of ways, but incredibly productive collegiate career. Amari Rodgers was an outlier in a number of ways, but played for a blue blood school, also a very productive collegiate player. And the Packers, Brian Gutekunst said on the record, we didn't apply our normal receiver model to him. We considered him a different type of player, whether it's a weapon player or however they want to categorize that. But as I look at this class, guys who fit the size requirements, you must be this tall to ride this ride, and the productivity requirements, and are likely to go on day 2, because you guys, I know you like, Luther Burden III or Emeka Ebuka, like those guys. The Packers are probably just not going to do it. Just probably not. Like at some point we'll talk about them because there's a non-zero chance that they take one. I think there have been drafts in Brian Gutekunst's tenure, I think 2020. There were players they were ready and willing to take when that all happened. And they did not make it to Green Bay's pick. They tried to trade back up to get a receiver. It didn't work out. They were able to do it in 2022 for Christian Watson. I think no doubt this guy checks every box for them until further notice is Jaden Higgins from Iowa State. 6'4", 214, 2 high-level seasons, over 900 yards, over 1,000 yards in one of those seasons. Senior Bowl player. And the Packers love Senior Bowl players. He's going to run faster than 4.6, I think, almost for sure. I don't know if he'll do the 3-cone, but if you watch him on tape, he moves with the sort of agility that belies his size. He is one of those guys. Another guy who is, I think, just a no doubt Packers type is Trey Harris from Ole Miss. 6'3", 210. Not 2, but 3 seasons, over 800 yards at Ole Miss. This is crazy. He had a man coverage yard per route run figure over 10 yards. 10 yards per route run against man coverage last year in college football. Now, a good deal of that was against secondary competition, Georgia Southern and those kinds of programs. But that's what you want from your best players, is to dominate the lesser competition, the lesser talent in front of you. The next closest player in yards per route run against man coverage was under 6. So Trey Harris was almost doubling up in terms of efficiency against man coverage. The next most successful player. That is cuckoo bananas. Alec Ayumanor from Stanford. West Coast, Packers love that. 6'2", 210, 2 seasons over 800 yards. Top 100 guy, potentially. Senior Bowl player. I think at this point, 3rd, 4th round, probably. I don't know that he makes the Packers materially better. I don't know that he does anything better than the guys that they currently have, but could be a potential bucket getter. And then the wild card here, Jalen Royals, 5'11", 5'11 and 3/8, but he's 210. And I have heard, this is Utah State kid, I have heard he is like high 4.2s, low 4.3s kind of player. If you're 5'11 and 3/8, so almost 5'11 and a half, and you're 210, I mean, he's thick, lower body, built like a running back, built like Deebo. Like imagine Deebo Samuel with a rocket pack. That's what Jalen Royals is. I'm going to ask Keith Sanchez when he comes on from Locked On NFL Draft if he thinks Jalen Royals can play outside, because that would be the key. You don't want a duplicative skill set with Jaden Reed. So we'll see what he says there. 2 other names that I want to bring up here. Jack Besh from TCU is a name that I mentioned before, 6'1", 212. He only had 1 season of high-level production, but it was last year at TCU, and then 3 years ago at LSU, led that team in receiving at LSU, and then transferred to TCU eventually. So I think he fits a lot of the check marks that they would want. Reminds me a lot of Jordy Nelson. Blocks, tough after the catch, faster than you, sneaky fast, right? And then Pat Bryant from Illinois, 6'3", 200. Only one season of super high-level production, but part of that is because Illinois, I think he has 3 seasons over 600 yards. And he's that, it's 3rd and 6, let me just body up a corner on a slant and get you a first down. He's that bucket getter. Like maybe he's not a high-end number one. I think Jaden Higgins has a chance to be that. I think Jaden Higgins is really, really good. I think when it's all said and done, he settles in that like top 40 kind of player range. I don't think he makes it to the Packers' second-round pick. I think Jaden Higgins, if the Packers want to draft him, it's going to have to be a trade out of the first round into the high 30s. We'll see if that's available to them. And then there's some day 3 guys. Nick Nash from San Jose State certainly has the production, has the size, 2 seasons over 700 yards with a 1,300-yard season in there. Kobe Hudson from Directional Florida. He's got 2 seasons over 700 yards and another over 600 yards at 6'1", 200. You got to be fast enough. You got to be agile enough. And then Ricky White is an interesting name. UNLV, 2 seasons over 1,000 yards. Big time production, but showed up at the Shrine Bowl, 6 flat, 179. That's just too small. Now, if he shows up at the combine, 185, 186, I think he's going to run fast. Like, and if he shows up 186 and runs 4.4, cool. Remember, Jaden Reed, 5'11", 187. But the Packers asked him, hey, how do you feel about putting on some weight? He said, oh, yeah, I can do that. And got to 195. Apparently was playing at 195. Which is sort of where they like to be over 190, but 195 that would be even better. He's 5'11". That's why I think Jalen Royals, I think fits for them. He's 5'11" and change, 212. From a density standpoint, and you're going to get the explosiveness, I think that makes a ton of sense. The 2 names to me to watch in all this, Jaden Higgins, Jalen Royals. Those are the 2 guys on day 2 that I think for the Packers make the most sense. We'll see how they test. Let's see what Keith Sanchez thinks about them. We'll talk to him next on Locked On Packers. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you missed the opening tip-off or want to bet on fourth quarter comebacks, you can stay in the action. So if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting features because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether I'm watching a late game rally or I want to pick a player to hit a clutch 3 late. I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Joining me now from Locked On NFL Draft, my pal Keith Sanchez. And Keith, the Combine is an important week for the Green Bay Packers because they care about this stuff. They care about the testing. They care about their athletic models. And the beauty of it is, in this draft, they're going to be in the market for some guys who you have to do that. Cornerback, that's a stopwatch position. Edge rusher, pass rusher on the interior, we care about the measurables for those guys. And this is a deep class with those pass rushers. Is this a class where you feel like if you're a team like the Packers who's in the market for a pass rusher that they have to get that guy in the first round, or is there more depth here to your eyes?
I think there's more depth here. There's tons of depth, and I think it's a pick of the litter type situation, right? Because we talk about the Kyle Kennards, Barron Sowers, 2 of my favorite guys, but then you also think about, hey, where would Mike Green go? Would he be a top 10, top 15 pick, or would somebody reach and try to grab a Donovan Iziriku, right? Then you still look at guys like Jack Sawyer, J2 Tamamalu, James Pierce. I think the list can go on and on as far as edge rushers, and to be completely honest, if you're not fully convicted with a guy sitting at pick 15, pick 20, like I said, you could potentially move back and then you could recoup and maybe get 2 guys. So I think this is the class. If you need an edge rusher, there's no reason why you shouldn't walk away with 2 guys.
Yeah, this is a little bit of a pick your flavor draft too, because there are some smaller guys. You mentioned Pierce Jr. from Tennessee. He's 6'4", but in the 240s. Ezeraku from Boston College, he's 6'2"
Yep.
in the 240s. But then there's Shamar Stewart, who's,
Right.
6'5", 280. There's a handful of guys in the top 100 who are true defensive ends, like old school 4-3. You can set the edge defensive ends who are, 6'5", 280 in this draft class. Are those guys going to test well enough, you think, to be in that top 100 conversation?
I think so. I look at a guy like Jared Ivey from Ole Miss, right?
Love
That's
him.
another name just to throw out there that's in that 6'6", 280 range. And then even his teammate, Princely Uman-Milan, and what he can do as a true edge rusher. I think, and I look back to what the Los Angeles Rams did last year and how important that draft will prove for them moving forward, getting both Braden Fisk and Jared Verse. Now, I think with this draft, you have the opportunity, instead of spending a first round and a second round, I think you can do a second round and a third rounder and find that combination that could be able to lead your organization for many years to come.
This is one of those crazy things. I think there were 37 defensive tackles invited to the combine, which is like 10 or 15 more than were drafted last year. I mean, that's crazy. I do think the Packers are going to be in the market. This is another one. Pick your flavor. There's guys like Kenneth Grant who are 340 pounds. And then there's guys who, like Derek Harmon, are 313, even some smaller guys, 290, 295, who are interior penetrators. Is the value once again, you think, on day two, or they're bona fide blue chip day one guys to find here?
Yeah, first of all, I think there are bona fide blue chip guys, and you mentioned the name that I may be higher than a lot of the consensus, and that's Kenneth Grant. I think this big boy can roll. You put him in the middle of your defense, he's ready to rock and roll. And I think there were times, obviously Mason Graham is, the more talented upside prospect, but if you from game to game, there were some games where Kenneth Grant outperformed Mason Graham. So I wanted to give Grant a shout out, but then also I think you can find a second round pick that can play really well. I look at the Senior Bowl and how we had Omar Norman Lott, the defensive tackle from Tennessee.
Tom McShay's guy.
Yeah, if you want to watch a guy that can win quickly and demolish guys with power, watch him. That's a guy to look out for, because he can be a true game wrecker in the middle of a defense.
So if you're going to put together like, hey, this is where I think we can find, like, if I'm the Packers and I want to come out of this with another edge rusher and another defensive tackle, if you're just in a perfect world, like, I want to maximize talent and value, where are you trying to, in a perfect world, find those guys? Is it like, I'm gonna go second round edge, third round defensive tackle, first round? Like, what do you think is the perfect way, if everything fell exactly right for you, that you'd want it to play out?
Yep, I would trade my first round pick, and I would find a team that potentially has multiple seconds or some combination of a second, third, and fourth. Trade my first round pick, and we'll see about 2026 also, right? But if ideally, I would like to recoup more second, third round picks, and I think the sweet spot in this draft, I would say, when you talk about value aligning with positional need and positional value in this draft, is probably from pick 35 to probably about pick 75. If you have multiple picks in there, you can walk away with some really talented players. And I know the Green Bay Packers, I even look at them for a cornerback need, right?
Yeah.
And I think about guys like Azariah Thomas, where they have the height, the length, and they can run. That would be a prime candidate. And then one guy that stuck out to me, that after the Senior Bowl, I had to jump back to his film, cornerback from Virginia Tech, Dorian Strong. Long, can run, he's physical. Check him out. He can play man, he can play zone. I think he has the goods to be able to play high level football in the NFL.
Well, you went right where I wanted to go. The cornerback position, I think the Packers are probably going to come out of this with two. If someone were to fall in the first round, do you think there's someone worthy of a first round pick? Because I look at the top of this draft, Travis Hunter, if we assume he's a corner, top 3 pick in all likelihood, right? Will Johnson, it sounds like going to be a top 10, top 15 kind of pick. That next tier, I feel like there are huge differences of opinion on, with Benjamin Morrison and Jahdae Barron and some of the other guys. It's like you could pick the next 5 guys from a hat, basically, and you might get different opinions from every single team on those guys. Where are you on that sort of second tier of players?
Yeah, the second tier I think is good, not great. And for that reason, and exactly what you explained, right, as far as there being a bucket of maybe 4 to 5 guys, I probably punt on it. If I'm sitting there and I desperately want a corner, I probably punt on it and I say, hey, give me one of the guys that I just named versus letting me try to take a swing on the back end of the first round pick, trying to, I guess, fit a positional need into the draft versus letting the board fall to me.
Packer fans with the draft in Green Bay are like, please don't trade the pick. Please don't trade the pick. Please don't trade the pick. But it does seem like unless they can trade the pick for an impact player, like I think Packer fans, if they trade the pick for, Max Crosby or DK Metcalf, no one's going to be upset.
100%.
Like, the joke right now on Packers Twitter is like, just let Max Crosby announce the trade down from the first round pick, and the crowd will go crazy. Like, that will be great. We got more with Keith Sanchez from Locked On NFL Draft coming up here on Locked On Packers. Let's talk about, though, receiver, because Christian Watson is going to be out for most of this season. The Packers have decisions to make on his future, on Romeo Doubs' future. And this was a receiver room that, while I'm still high on a lot of these guys, they did not take the step forward in the case of Dontavian Wicks and Jaden Reed in year 2, in the case of Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson in year 3. So who are the players on day 2? I know that you're going to say that you think, and that's where Green Bay's had more success than basically any other team in the league at finding day 2 receivers. It is the sweet spot historically in the draft. The second round is like the perfect place to find that value. Are there guys you like in that spot for the Packers or anybody?
Yeah, and with the Green Bay Packers, I think you did a good job illustrating that, right? With just, it's almost, how they say the cliche for quarterbacks that if you have 2, you have none.
Right.
And then like it's with the Packers, right? If you have 6, then you kind of only have 1, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's how it is for the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah.
But yeah, a couple guys, in both of the guys that you named, right? Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, are big body wide receivers, right? So you ideally want to replace size with size. So the 2 guys I look at is Pat Bryant, the wide receiver out of Illinois, a really smooth route runner. And then I also look at Jaden Higgins as a guy that I like. I think he can do a couple things, and he's tall. He has really good length, former basketball player. So he understands playing above the rim, go and get the football. So that's 2 of the guys immediately that jump off the screen to me, as far as especially being Packers fits too.
You saw Jaden Higgins at the Senior Bowl in person. I've only watched the tape. I watched the tape of the reps at the Senior Bowl. He is a unique blend of smooth and sudden. And guys at 6'4", 6'5" generally do not move like that.
Yep.
My question for you, Keith, is like, why are we not talking about him higher?
That may be the whole school situation, right? The Iowa State kind of being out of the way. And I think that's what's going to be fun. And you do a great job of this, right? Of just going with your gut and watching the film and saying how you feel, right? But I think come draft night, I think that's what's going to be a reality check for a lot of people, is that they're going to be like, oh, wait, I didn't expect him to go. And it's like, you know what? Because the NFL just simply watched the film and said, we want the best player, right? And I think that's what it's going to come down to. I think he should be looked at as a top 40, top 45 football player when you combine the speed, the athleticism, the ability to catch the football, and especially at his size.
I'm going to give you 2 names that I am very interested to see how they test, because I think it could go a long way in determining if and when they will be in range for the Packers. TC receiver Jack Besh, who you got to see at the Senior Bowl, and Utah State Jalen Royals.
Yep. I'll explain Jack Besh, and he's almost a guy that I mentioned. Obviously, me being assistant coach at LSU, Jack Besh is originally from Louisiana, right? He originally went to LSU. He was there first. So a young man that I'm extremely familiar with. And for the entire story, right, you obviously want to commend him for even showing up to the Senior Bowl. But I'll say this for Jack is that he's always been that type of grinder. Like since high school, he's been tough. He's been gritty. He's been a locker room. He's been a find-a-way football player. So I think if you're a GM and you want a guy that can kind of turn your locker room around, or just a good culture guy, it is by far Jack Besh. And then everything else, I think he will simply figure it out. I don't want to compare him from a play style wise, but just, do you remember what Hines Ward kind of meant to the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Yeah.
Wide receiver core, and nothing dealing with talent, right? But just what he bought from a mental perspective.
Locked his ass off.
Yep. I think Jack Besh can provide those same type of situations. And then Jalen Royals, I like him too. I think he can roll. I think you put him in with Jaden Reed, you got a dynamic 1-2 combination that'll make it very difficult for the rest of the NFC North.
You think he can play outside?
I think he can. Just from a body perspective, looking at his body, he's a very thick wide receiver. So if anything, he can power through some press. But him being a movement piece along with Jaden Reed, I think it'll be fun for Jaden Reed because it allowed Jaden to be able to move even more.
Wasn't Royals almost 220 at the Senior Bowl?
That's what I say. He's almost built like a running back. And I knew he was a thicker guy, but seeing him in person was like, he was bigger than 90% of the running backs at the Senior Bowl, right?
There is a rumor. I don't like to, run with unsubstantiated rumors, but I have heard this multiple times that he was clocked early in his career at Utah State in the 4.2s.
Wow. And
if he can run that, even if he just runs 4.35 at 220, I think that's going to open a lot of eyes. I think he's someone who could make a lot of money in Indy.
Oh, if he does that 100%, he might be that third wide receiver that we're talking about, right? That goes in the first round. That the Packers might be looking at and saying, do we finally break the curse and go with it?
Utah State quarterback went to Utah State. They did not overlap, but it's one of those things. Okay, so it sounds like you are very much feeling like the meat of this draft, like the difference between the 25th player and the 50th player, pretty small. So if you're the Packers sitting there at 23, the move might be to move back. Is there someone who, if they fall to Green Bay, outside of, one of the top 2 or 3 guys, where you're just like, they have to walk the cart in, like right now?
Yeah, I look at either of these defensive tackles, right? Potentially, we didn't talk about Walter Nolan. I think he's a guy that potentially falls. I say, you have to take him, right, and just roll with it and let him be disruptive. Even if it's not a huge positional need, I think you still go with it. So he's a guy, because you want to look at the combination of him, Kenneth Grant, whether it's Mason Graham go. So I think either of those 3 defensive tackles fall. I think that they're good enough prospects and borderline on that blue chip prospect level that you take those guys and then you worry about the cornerback, wide receiver, edge rusher position after that.
I've been saying that the goal for the Packers should be to leave with at least one of the Michigan guys and one of the Ole Miss guys.
I like it. And if they do that, they win.
And we just saw that the Philadelphia Eagles, they won a Super Bowl doing basically exactly that. So maybe it's not Georgia guys. The Packers love Georgia guys. The Eagles love Georgia guys. But you can stay in the SEC, the Big Ten. They can figure it out. Keith, appreciate the time, man. Everyone should go listen to Locked On NFL Draft. Our guy Damian Parson on there with you. We appreciate the time as always.
No problem.
All right, thanks to Keith for joining the show. Great to talk with him. Next week, we will be at the NFL Draft. Our Monday show will come from, the friendly confines here in the office. And then once we get into Tuesday's show might be our Adam Rank show because I'll be getting into Indy on Monday, be hoping to make contact, network, do the thing there. I don't know how much information I'm going to be able to gather in there. I think it'll be once we get to Tuesday day, then for the Wednesday day into the Thursday show, that's when I'll be able to give you the insights, the good stuff that I'm getting from the combine, the storylines, the conversations that are being had over drinks at the JW Marriott bar. No free ads, but that's just where it's going to be. So that's next week. Coming up on Locked On Packers from Indianapolis, from the Combine. Follow me on all the social medias for all of that. Subscribe wherever you get podcasts. Subscribe on YouTube so you can stay Locked On Packers.